The afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows of room 412, casting a golden glow on the array of student science projects displayed across the laboratory tables. Sarah Richardson moved between the stations, her heart swelling with pride as her fourth-grade students presented their work with unprecedented enthusiasm. At 32, she had already earned a reputation as one of Pine Grove Elementary's most innovative educators. "And this is how we can clean water using natural filtration," explained Marcus, a usually shy student who now spoke with confidence as he demonstrated his project. Sarah noticed how his eyes lit up when she nodded encouragingly, reminding her exactly why she had chosen this profession 6 years ago. The Teacher of the Year plaque on her desk caught the sunlight, still new enough to make her smile every time she glanced at it. The award ceremony last week had been a validation of her unconventional teaching methods, combining traditional curriculum with real-world applications that kept her students engaged and excited about learning. As the final bell rang and students filed out with excited chatter about tomorrow's multicultural festival, Sarah began organizing the materials for her upcoming presentation to the school board. Her proposed program would integrate diverse historical perspectives into the standard curriculum, something she had been researching and developing for months. Ms. Richardson, a small voice drew her attention to the doorway. Lily Chen, one of her most diligent students, stood clutching a folder. "I finished the extra credit project about my family's journey to America. Could you look at it before tomorrow?" Sarah checked her watch. 5:45 p.m. Her evening plans could wait. "Of course, Lily. Come in." As they reviewed the project together, Sarah marveled at the detailed family tree and the carefully written stories of Lily's grandparents' immigration experience. This was exactly the kind of personal connection to history she wanted all her students to explore. By the time Sarah finally packed up her materials, the custodial staff was making their final rounds. Through her classroom windows, she could see the setting sun painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Her car, a reliable Honda Civic she purchased after her first year of teaching, sat alone in the teacher's parking lot. Loading her arms with student artwork for the festival and tomorrow's lesson plans, Sarah hummed softly to herself. The weight of responsibility felt light tonight, buoyed by the success of the science fair and Lily's wonderful project. She had plans to integrate both into her board presentation, showing how cultural awareness and scientific inquiry could work hand in hand. As she drove through the quiet streets of their suburban town, Sarah mentally rehearsed her presentation. The streetlights were just beginning to flicker on, creating pools of light that guided her way home. She passed the community center where she volunteered on weekends, teaching literacy classes to adult learners. The coffee shop where she graded papers every Sunday afternoon waved its closed sign in the evening breeze. The radio played softly in the background, a jazz piece she recognized from her father's collection. It reminded her to call him about this weekend's family dinner. Her mother would want to hear about the science fair, and her younger sister would tease her about staying late at school again. The thought made her smile. Their support had been unwavering throughout her teaching career. Little did Sarah know that this peaceful evening drive, filled with hope and possibility, was about to take an unexpected turn, one that would challenge everything she believed about her place in the community she so lovingly served. The first indication that something was amiss came when Sarah noticed the patrol car in her rearview mirror. It had been following her for 3 blocks, maintaining the same steady distance. Her hands instinctively tightened on the steering wheel as she recalled her father's wisdom from years of driving lessons. "Stay calm, check your speed, and remember who you are," his voice echoed in her mind. Sarah glanced at her speedometer. Exactly 35 miles per hour in a 35 zone. Her turn signal clicked steadily as she prepared to turn onto Maple Avenue, each flash illuminating her Educator of Excellence parking permit dangling from the rearview mirror. The patrol car's lights suddenly burst into life, painting the interior of her Honda in alternating shades of red and blue. Sarah's heart quickened, but her movements remained deliberate and composed. She pulled over smoothly, positioning her car well off the road, just as her father had taught her. Her teacher's instincts kicked in as she mentally documented each detail. 8:47 p.m. Clear weather, 2 blocks from home. With practiced precision, Sarah reached for her phone, opening the dashcam app her brother had insisted she install. "It's just a precaution," he'd said. Now, as she placed the phone carefully on her dashboard, she silently thanked him for his foresight. Her hands moved to the steering wheel, placed firmly at 10 and 2 o'clock. Officer James Miller approached her window, flashlight beam cutting through the evening darkness. Sarah noticed how he stood slightly behind her doorframe, his right hand resting near his holster, standard procedure she remembered from the school's safety training sessions with local law enforcement. License and registration. Officer Miller's voice carried a sharp edge that contrasted with the community-friendly tone she'd heard him use during those same school sessions. Sarah kept her movements slow and narrated each action, just as she'd learned. "I'm reaching for my purse on the passenger seat to get my license," she said clearly, maintaining a professional tone similar to addressing a difficult parent conference. The beam of the flashlight followed her movements, harsh and unwavering. As she handed over her documents, her teacher's ID slipped out alongside her license. Officer Miller's expression flickered, recognition, perhaps surprise, but his demeanor remained unchanged. "Do you know why I pulled you over, Ms. Richardson?" "No, Officer Miller, I don't," Sarah replied, noting his nameplate and badge number in her mental record. She was surprised he didn't acknowledge knowing her from the multiple times he'd visited her classroom for the school's community outreach program. "Your taillight is out," he stated, though Sarah distinctly remembered her mechanic's thorough inspection just last week. She had the receipt in her glove compartment, along with a detailed inspection report. "Officer Miller, I believe there must be a mistake. I had my car inspected last week, and all lights were functioning properly. I have the documentation if you'd like to see it." Her voice remained steady, professional, the same voice she used when mediating playground disputes. The officer's flashlight beam swept across her backseat, lingering on the student artwork and teaching materials. "Step out of the vehicle, Ms. Richardson." His tone had shifted, carrying an authority that seemed to dismiss her professional standing in the community. Sarah's mind raced to her morning lesson about civic responsibility and mutual respect. As she carefully unbuckled her seatbelt, she realized this encounter was becoming a real-world test of everything she taught her students about maintaining dignity in challenging situations. Standing beside her car, Sarah drew strength from years of classroom management experience. The cool evening air carried the scent of blooming jasmine from nearby gardens, the same gardens her students had studied during their botany unit. She maintained perfect posture, her professional attire a subtle reminder of her position in the community. "Place your hands where I can see them," Officer Miller instructed, his flashlight beam now joined by a second from his newly arrived partner, Officer Brooks. Sarah complied, keeping her movements deliberate and calm, just as she demonstrated to her students during their unit on civic interactions. "I'm going to check your vehicle," Officer Brooks announced, moving toward her car. Sarah's mind flashed to the letter of commendation from the superintendent tucked in her glove compartment, right next to the recent vehicle inspection report. She wanted to mention them but remembered her father's advice. "Choose your moments carefully." "Officer Miller," Sarah spoke with the measured tone she used during parent-teacher conferences, "I understand you're doing your job, but I want to respectfully point out that my dashcam is recording this interaction. I have documented proof of my recent vehicle inspection, and I'd be happy to show you." The mention of the dashcam caused a subtle shift in Officer Miller's stance. His partner paused momentarily in his inspection of her car's trunk, where Sarah's carefully organized teaching materials lay in labeled boxes, tomorrow's multicultural festival supplies now at risk of being disturbed. Through the darkness, Sarah noticed Mrs. Chen, Lily's mother, slowing her car as she passed. Their eyes met briefly, and Sarah managed a small, reassuring nod. She had taught her students that true strength often meant maintaining dignity under pressure, and now she was living that lesson. "Ms. Richardson," Officer Miller's tone shifted slightly, becoming more formal. Are you aware that interfering with a police investigation is a serious offense? The question hung in the air, reminiscent of the thoughtful pauses she used in class to allow students to reflect on important concepts. "I'm not interfering, officer," Sarah replied, her voice steady. "I'm cooperatively providing relevant information while exercising my right to document this interaction." Her words carried the same clarity she used when explaining complex topics to her fourth graders. Officer Brooks emerged from his search of her vehicle, shaking his head slightly at his partner. Sarah noticed her carefully arranged festival materials had indeed been displaced, but she focused on maintaining her composure. She thought of Marcus, her shy student who had found his voice during the science fair. Sometimes quiet strength spoke volumes. A third patrol car pulled up, its lights cutting through the growing crowd of onlookers. Sarah recognized several parents from her school among them, their presence both a comfort and a reminder of her role as an educator even in this moment. "Your taillight appears to be functioning now," Officer Miller noted, though his tone suggested reluctance. Sarah wondered if he remembered reading "To Kill a Mockingbird" to her class during last month's community reading day. "Yes, sir," she responded, her professional demeanor unwavering. "As I mentioned, I have documentation of my recent inspection. Would you like to review it?" She knew her students might hear about this incident, and she wanted her actions to reflect the principles she taught them about respectful dialogue and standing up for truth. The growing number of witnesses, the functioning taillight, and Sarah's calm documentation of events began to shift the dynamics of the situation. Yet, she understood that this moment would become more than just a traffic stop. It would be a lesson in perseverance, dignity, and the power of maintaining one's composure in challenging circumstances. The morning after the incident, Sarah arrived at school earlier than usual, her mind clear and focused. The sunrise painted her classroom in gentle hues as she began organizing her defense with the same methodical approach she used for lesson planning. Her laptop displayed a blank document titled "Documentation of Events, Building Understanding." Principal Martinez knocked softly before entering. "Sarah, I heard about last night. The parents are talking." He pulled up a chair, his expression concerned but supportive. "Mrs. Chen called me this morning. She recorded part of the incident on her phone." Sarah nodded, straightening a stack of student artwork that still needed to be hung for the multicultural festival. "I'm gathering everything systematically," she explained, pulling out a leather portfolio her grandmother had given her upon graduating from Teachers College. "I believe this situation can teach us all something valuable." Her preparation began with the basics. The mechanic's detailed inspection report dated just 7 days prior, complete with photographs of every working light on her vehicle. Mr. Thompson, the mechanic, had already emailed her a signed statement confirming the taillight's perfect condition during the inspection. "I'd like to be present when you present your case," Dr. Martinez offered, reviewing her growing collection of documents. "Your approach to this, it's exactly what we try to teach our students about problem solving and standing up for truth." Throughout the day, Sarah maintained her usual teaching excellence, turning a lesson on persuasive writing into an organic discussion about the power of organized information and clear communication. Her students sensed something different in their teacher's energy, a quiet determination that inspired them to put extra effort into their own work. During her lunch break, Sarah received an unexpected email from Officer Rodriguez, who regularly conducted safety workshops at the school. "I reviewed the body camera footage from last night," he wrote. "I'm willing to provide a statement about your consistent positive interactions with law enforcement during our school programs." The pieces continued falling into place. Sarah's dashcam footage showed the entire interaction, including the functioning taillight clearly visible in reflections from store windows she passed. Her father, a retired paralegal, helped her organize everything into a compelling narrative that focused on facts rather than accusations. "Your biggest strength," he reminded her over the phone, "is your reputation as an educator who brings people together. Use that." Sarah thought of her upcoming multicultural festival, how it celebrated differences while highlighting common ground. By late afternoon, her portfolio had grown impressive. It contained her complete driving record showing 8 years without a single violation, letters from parents attesting to her character, documentation of her community involvement and awards, time-stamped photographs of her car from multiple angles, statements from witnesses at the scene, a detailed timeline of events with supporting evidence. Dr. Martinez returned after school, bringing an unexpected addition: security footage from the school parking lot, showing Sarah's fully functioning lights as she left that evening. "The school board stands behind you," he assured her. "This isn't just about one traffic stop. It's about upholding the principles we teach our students." Sarah carefully organized everything into sections, applying the same attention to detail she used when preparing student portfolios for the district review board. Each document told part of a larger story, not just about one evening's events, but about a dedicated educator's commitment to truth and justice. As she finished her preparation, Sarah glanced at the Martin Luther King Jr. quote displayed above her whiteboard. "The time is always right to do what is right." Tomorrow, she would face Judge Blackwood's court with the same dignity and preparedness she brought to her classroom every day. The marble halls of the county courthouse echoed with footsteps as Sarah walked confidently toward courtroom 302, her leather portfolio tucked professionally under her arm. Dr. Martinez and several colleagues from Pine Grove Elementary formed a supportive presence behind her. The morning light filtered through tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished floor. "All rise." The Honorable Judge William Blackwood presiding. The bailiff's voice commanded attention as the judge entered, his silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses giving him a scholarly appearance. Sarah stood tall, drawing strength from her years of presenting to tough audiences, from skeptical parents to demanding district officials. Before her case, Sarah observed Judge Blackwood's interactions with other defendants. His demeanor was stern but fair as he handled various traffic violations. She noticed his occasional shows of leniency, particularly when presented with clear evidence and respectful arguments. Case number 47,892. Sarah Richardson, the clerk announced. Sarah approached the podium with the same purposeful stride she used when walking into her classroom. Her portfolio opened to reveal meticulously organized evidence, each page protected in clear sleeves. "Your Honor," she began, her voice carrying the same engaging tone that kept her students' attention. "I'm here today not just to contest a citation, but to demonstrate the importance of truth and proper documentation in our justice system." Judge Blackwood peered over his glasses, his interest seemingly piqued by her professional demeanor and organized approach. "Proceed, Ms. Richardson." Sarah presented her evidence methodically, like a well-planned lesson. She started with the mechanic's report, moving smoothly to the dashcam footage. "As you can see, Your Honor, the taillight was fully functional, confirmed by both professional inspection and video evidence." The judge leaned forward slightly as Sarah introduced statements from witnesses, including Officer Rodriguez's letter about her consistent positive interactions with law enforcement. Her presentation wove together facts and character evidence into a compelling narrative about community relationships and mutual respect. "In my classroom, Your Honor," Sarah continued, her passion for education evident, "I teach my students that justice relies on careful examination of evidence and respectful dialogue. Today, I'm putting those lessons into practice." Dr. Martinez took the stand as a character witness, his testimony painting a picture of Sarah's dedication to education and community building. Ms. Richardson's multicultural festival last week brought together families from all backgrounds. Your Honor, she exemplifies the values we strive to instill in our students. The courtroom remained attentive as Sarah concluded her presentation. Several of her colleagues nodded in approval, and she noticed Officer Rodriguez, who had come to show support, sitting quietly in the back row. Even the court clerk had stopped shuffling papers to listen. "Your Honor," Sarah said, drawing her presentation to a close, "this case represents more than a traffic citation. It's about the importance of careful observation, thorough documentation, and respectful interaction in our community." These are principles I teach my students every day." Judge Blackwood removed his glasses, studying the evidence before him. The courtroom fell silent, waiting for his response. Sarah stood confidently, knowing she had presented her case with the same thoroughness and dignity she expected from her students. The morning sun had shifted, now illuminating the American flag behind the judge's bench. Sarah thought of her students, imagining how she would turn this experience into a lesson about civic engagement and the power of preparation. "Ms. Richardson," Judge Blackwood finally spoke, his tone measured and thoughtful, "your presentation has been most—" He paused, choosing his next words carefully, aware of the packed courtroom hanging on his every word. Judge Blackwood's pause stretched the courtroom atmosphere taut with anticipation. He carefully arranged the evidence documents Sarah had presented, taking particular interest in the time-stamped photographs and the mechanic's detailed report. "Ms. Richardson," he continued, his voice carrying the weight of decades on the bench, "in my 30 years serving this court, I have rarely seen such a thoroughly prepared and professionally presented case." He lifted the dashcam footage documentation, studying it with renewed interest. Sarah maintained her poised stance at the podium, her hands clasped loosely in front of her. The same quiet confidence she brought to parent-teacher conferences radiated through her professional demeanor. Around her, the courtroom remained hushed, hanging on each word. "The evidence you've presented today is not just about a traffic stop," Judge Blackwood continued, removing his glasses to make direct eye contact. "It speaks to character, community involvement, and the importance of truth in our justice system." He gestured to the stack of character references from parents, colleagues, and community members. Officer Rodriguez shifted in his seat at the back of the courtroom, his presence a silent testament to the bridges Sarah had built between law enforcement and her school community. Dr. Martinez sat straight-backed in the first row, his proud smile reflecting the support of the entire school administration. Furthermore, the judge continued, lifting Officer Rodriguez's statement, "Your consistent positive interactions with law enforcement during school programs demonstrate a commitment to building understanding in our community. This court takes notice of such efforts." Sarah thought of her students, imagining how she would translate this moment into a lesson about perseverance and preparation. Her fourth graders had been studying civil rights history, and now she had a personal example of how justice could work when approached with dignity and thorough documentation. "The citation for the broken taillight is hereby dismissed," Judge Blackwood announced, his gavel punctuating the declaration. But he wasn't finished. "Additionally, this court would like to commend Ms. Richardson for her exemplary presentation and her contribution to our community's youth." A subtle ripple of approval moved through the courtroom. Mrs. Chen, who had witnessed the original incident, wiped a tear from her eye. Several of Sarah's colleagues exchanged knowing glances. This was the teacher they knew, turning even a challenging situation into an opportunity for learning and growth. "Ms. Richardson," Judge Blackwood added, leaning forward slightly, "would you be willing to share your documentation methods with our clerk's office? Your organizational system could serve as a model for future cases." Sarah's heart swelled with quiet pride. "Of course, Your Honor. As an educator, I believe in sharing resources that can benefit our community." Her response carried the same genuine warmth she brought to her classroom each day. The judge nodded approvingly. "This case is dismissed. Ms. Richardson, thank you for reminding this court of the power of thorough preparation and respectful advocacy." His gavel fell one final time, its sound echoing through the now buzzing courtroom. As Sarah gathered her materials, several law students who had been observing the proceedings approached to ask about her presentation methods. Officer Rodriguez made his way forward to shake her hand, and Dr. Martinez beamed with pride. Outside the courthouse, the morning sun had reached its full strength, casting no shadows. Sarah held her portfolio close, knowing it contained more than just evidence. It held a lesson about dignity, preparation, and the power of standing up for truth with grace and professionalism. Her phone buzzed with a text from her co-teacher. "The kids can't wait to hear about your day in court." Sarah smiled, already planning how to turn this experience into a teachable moment about civic engagement and the importance of documenting truth. The following week, Sarah's classroom buzzed with energy as she transformed her courtroom experience into an interactive civics lesson. Student desks were arranged in a mock courtroom setup, with a judge's bench at the front and a makeshift podium crafted from cardboard and creativity. Remember, Sarah guided her fourth graders through their simulation. What's the first step in presenting your case? Little Marcus, now confident in his public speaking, raised his hand eagerly. Document everything and organize it clearly, he announced, proudly holding up his folder decorated with careful labels and dividers, a skill he'd learned from their recent project management lessons. Word of Sarah's successful court presentation spread through educational circles. The district superintendent, Dr. Amelia Foster, visited her classroom one sunny morning to observe this innovative approach to teaching civic responsibility. Ms. Richardson, Dr. Foster pulled her aside after watching the students conduct their mock trials. Would you consider developing this into a district-wide curriculum? We need more practical civics education that students can relate to. Sarah's approach had struck a chord. Her method of combining real-world experiences with classroom learning created a framework that engaged students on multiple levels. The school board unanimously approved her proposal for a new program, Building Bridges, Education and Civic Engagement. Local law enforcement took notice too. Officer Rodriguez approached her about collaborating on a new community outreach initiative. Your students understand the importance of documentation and respectful dialogue better than most adults, he observed during one of their planning sessions. Together, they developed workshops that brought students, teachers, and law enforcement officers together in constructive dialogue. The sessions focused on understanding rights, responsibilities, and the power of proper documentation, all taught through Sarah's engaging, education-first approach. Principal Martinez supported these efforts wholeheartedly, allocating school resources to expand the program. What happened in that courtroom wasn't just about one case, he told the local education board. It's become a catalyst for positive change in how we teach civic responsibility. Sarah's students embraced these lessons with enthusiasm. They created their own documentation journals, recording daily observations and learning to present information clearly and effectively. Parents reported their children bringing these skills home, teaching siblings and parents about the importance of organized record-keeping. One morning, Sarah found an unexpected visitor in her classroom. Judge Blackwood himself. He had come to observe how she translated her courtroom experience into educational opportunities. Ms. Richardson, he said, watching her students work on their civic engagement projects, your case has become required reading for new court clerks. Your organization method is now part of our recommended guidelines for case presentation. The local education journal featured Sarah's innovative curriculum in their monthly publication. Building Bridges Through Education became the cover story, highlighting how one teacher's experience transformed into a community-wide movement for better understanding and communication. Even the mayor took notice, inviting Sarah to join the city's Education Advisory Board. We need voices like yours, she explained, educators who understand how to turn challenges into opportunities for growth and learning. As Sarah wrapped up her lesson that afternoon, she noticed Lily Chen carefully organizing her project materials using the documentation methods they'd learned. Ms. Richardson, Lily asked, can I teach these organization skills to my little sister's class? She's in 2nd grade. Sarah smiled, recognizing how knowledge and understanding rippled outward, touching life after life. Her students' eagerness to share what they'd learned confirmed what she'd always believed, that education was the most powerful tool for positive change. The sunlight streaming through her classroom windows illuminated the wall of student projects, each one a testament to how a single moment of standing up for truth could inspire a whole community to grow and learn together. 1 year after the courthouse incident, Sarah stood before a packed auditorium at the annual Education Excellence Conference. Educators from across the state had gathered to learn about her now famous Civic Engagement Through Education program. The afternoon light filtered through stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across eager faces. Learning doesn't just happen in textbooks, Sarah began, her voice carrying the same warmth that captivated her fourth graders. It happens in real moments, when we choose to transform challenges into opportunities for growth. Behind her, a slideshow displayed photographs of her students engaged in various community projects. The program had evolved beyond her wildest expectations. What started in her classroom had spread to 30 schools across the district. Students were learning about civic responsibility through hands-on experiences, documentation skills, and community engagement projects. Marcus, her once shy student, had recently won the district's Young Leaders Award for organizing a student-led community forum. Ms. Richardson taught us that our voices matter, he'd said in his acceptance speech, but how we use them matters even more. The police department had become an enthusiastic partner in the program. Officer Rodriguez and Sarah now co-led monthly workshops where students and officers engaged in open dialogue. These sessions had become so successful that neighboring districts were implementing similar programs. True education, Sarah continued her speech, gesturing to the wall of student achievements behind her, builds bridges between different parts of our community. It teaches us that preparation and dignity are more powerful than conflict and misunderstanding. Judge Blackwood, now a regular guest speaker in her classroom, had become an advocate for educational reform in the judicial system. His court now hosted student observers twice monthly, helping young people understand the importance of civic responsibility and proper documentation. Sarah's curriculum had earned state recognition, and a major educational publisher had approached her about developing it into a textbook. But her greatest satisfaction came from the daily transformations she witnessed in her classroom. Lily Chen, the student whose family story had stayed late with her that fateful evening, had started a peer mentoring program. Everyone has a story, Lily told younger students, and everyone deserves to have their story heard and understood. Dr. Martinez joined Sarah on stage as she concluded her speech. Ms. Richardson's legacy isn't just about teaching civic responsibility, he addressed the audience. It's about showing us how education can transform communities when we focus on understanding and growth. The standing ovation that followed wasn't just for Sarah, it was for every student, teacher, officer, and community member who had helped turn one challenging moment into a movement for positive change. Back in her classroom the next day, Sarah watched her students work on their latest project, creating documentation guides for incoming fourth graders. The walls were covered with their artwork and writing, each piece telling a story of learning and growth. Ms. Richardson, a new student, asked, raising her hand, "Is it true that you once taught a judge about organization?" The class laughed warmly, now familiar with the story that had become part of their school's legacy. "What I taught," Sarah replied, smiling at the eager faces before her, "was that when we approach challenges with dignity, preparation, and respect, we create opportunities for everyone to learn and grow together." As the afternoon sun painted her classroom in warm hues, Sarah looked at the quote sheet added above her whiteboard. "Education is the most powerful tool we can use to create understanding." Below it hung the original portfolio from her court case, now a teaching tool and reminder that every challenge carries the seed of positive change. The bell rang, but her students lingered, eager to share their latest discoveries and ideas. Sarah knew that this moment of engaged learning and shared understanding was the true legacy of that night 1 year ago. It wasn't just about winning a case, it was about showing how education could light the way forward, one lesson at a time.